less apathetic. Um, we need to limit our, in this, in this culture that insists that we are limitless, that human beings and our big brains can solve all these problems. We need to embrace limits. I think my father's work has been largely about limits. Um, and how, and I don't, unless you can accept limits, you're not going to be a happy person. And unless you can accept limits, you're going to do a lot of, people will do a lot of harm. I think that we have allowed our economy to run everything in this country. We don't seem to understand, our leadership certainly doesn't understand, that we are a country. We are not just an economy. We're not just our institutions. We're not just our military. We are the land and the people of this country. And we have allowed the land and the people that ought to belong to the land, we've allowed them to be destroyed for cheap food, cheap building material, cheap fuel. Rural America has been treated as a sacrifice zone. So how do you manage to mistreat most of this country? Well, let's see, you look down on the people there. You call them rednecks and rubes and so on. You dislike and treat with disrespect people who work with their bodies and their minds. This has been very effective. This is prejudice. And it has allowed, well, the coal companies to come into eastern Kentucky and buy up mineral rights for $1 an acre or less. It's allowed terrible, terrible abuse, and it's been ignored for a long, long time. It's been ignored for a long time, and actually, my father says, and I've done some amount of study on this, he says that it's hard to find a place in history that country people have been valued. I mean, in the history of the world, where country people who work with their bodies have been valued. So this has just been set up in this country to funnel money to agro-industrial corporations, but also funnel money into a few pockets. And I think we're getting to a time now that we see, I think maybe more of a see. I know these young people that I've spoken to today have the capacity to see that this can't go on forever. You can't destroy the source of what you've got to survive, what you've got to have to survive, and survive. So to do something about this, I mean, we've been talking about this all day. I feel like this front row is going to be really bored because everything I say I've already said. But I think we've got to just get started. I have no time for cynicism, and I have no time for apathy, and I have no time for hopelessness. People who, of good intention, can do the right thing that's right in front of them to do. And once you get started at it, you become hopeful. You can become happy. You can become content. And I know this, and I'm seeing it at home with our work with farmers. I see it when I travel to other places and see the things that other people are doing. But we cannot wait for permission. We cannot wait for leadership to do what we think they ought to do, because they're not going to do it. And if they do something, it'll be wrong. So I just say, let's just get to it. You know, I was thinking today about one of my favorite books in the world is A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. by Solzhenitsyn. And it's about a prisoner who is in a political prisoner who's in Siberia. He has no idea why he's in prison, and he has no idea whether or not he'll ever get out. But he has a good day, and I would recommend it to everybody, because my father said to me not so long ago, even people in prison can do the right thing that's right in front of them to do. That's our freedom. That is true freedom. So this political prisoner has, he's half starved. He's working in 35 degrees below zero weather. He's a bricklayer by trade, and he gets a little extra bread. He does some good work. He has a good day. I just think that everybody should read that too. Read The Unsettling of America. Read A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, and then think about your life, and then think about what brings you joy and what your capacity is to live within limits and to do good work, and to do good work for reasons other than money, so on.
This is related to something you were saying there. I first read this collection of essays by Wendell Berry that we have for sale back there called Sex, Economy, Freedom, and Community, maybe 12 years ago. When I first started reading it, I probably couldn't have told you what topsoil was exactly.
Well, it's on the top.
Yeah, I would have been guessed. And by the time it was over, I'm like this activist for topsoil. When reading Wendell Berry has a way of radicalizing you in the best way. And you going around saying, you can't do that because we need that for our food. Don't you know where our food comes from? Saying those kinds of things to people. So I encourage you to be radicalized tonight, by picking up something like that. One of the things that Wendell talks about a lot too is the problems are big, but the solutions are not. And that there's especially not one big solution, and certainly not one big solution that's going to come from the government that would fix all of the problems we have related to land use, water quality, soil erosion, our food processes, what helps farmers. He says it's a lot of small things, a lot of people doing small things, and it'll take a lot of time, he says, and it'll take a lot of patience. And I recently heard him in an interview say that telling young people to have patience in an emergency is a terrible trial. It was sort of his way of sympathizing with the younger generation. Have patience in an emergency. But that all we can do, he was asked about the future, and he says, we don't have the right to prospect about it. All we can do is ask, what's the right thing to do? I wonder if you might speak to that simple question.
Well, you did a pretty good job.
Okay.
Well, I think it's just to continue to say, we're at this point in just a sort of, to me, I know that we don't want to talk too much about politics. Maybe we don't want to talk about politics or at all. But people seem just kind of out of their heads at the moment. Both sides, just terrified and worried, and it's all coming down, and it's, or whatever. And people have been asking me at the Berry Center, calling me and so on, well, what are you going to do now? What? Well, I'm going to keep doing what we do. I'm going to keep on. A bunch of scared to death people can't solve the problems that need to be solved. It's just not going to happen. Of course you have to deal with emergency situations, but I think, if a tornado heads this way, we're going to deal with the problem and get to safety. But the way to deal with these seemingly sometimes intractable problems is to just try to get to where you can begin to really sort out the problem. I've said at the Berry Center since we've started. You can't get anything done by going through all of the things that might go wrong if you try to do something. If you say, for instance, you wanted to feed the student body of Berry College from Berry Farm, say. Berry Farm, is that what I should call it? Berry Farm? This is interesting. Then you can't do that by saying all of the many things that could go wrong if you try it. Or they won't let us, or whatever it is that people say. What you do is you start, and then the work begins to reveal itself. And then you begin to see what needs to be done. So problems come up, and you begin to solve the problems. And then you've begun to do the work. We were saying earlier today, I mean, we're responsible to do the work. We're not responsible for the outcome. Do you see what I mean? We want to head to a good one. We want to have a vision for what we're after, but we're not responsible for success. We're responsible to try. And one of the things it seems to me that the adults in this country at the moment don't see is that if you begin this slow work of putting things back together, one thing at a time, two things together, then four things together, things are getting better as you go. So it's not, it doesn't happen like this, but as you go along, things get better. I mean, my work at the Berry Center has been very satisfying. It's not every day, but often, to watch farmers go from silent in rooms to a community again of people talking about ideas and solutions and specifics around genetics and for cattle and forage health and so on. That's a beautiful thing to see. My work at the Berry Center has brought me here. It's a wonderful thing to be here and to be with the young people I've seen today and to be with the older people I've also seen today. So I think we just got to settle down and to say this is going to require work, and the work will be a challenge, a proper challenge, but the work will be good. And we'll be working toward what ought to be rather than what ought never to have been.
Something I've heard you say a couple times today.
Yeah, you've heard me say everything a couple of times today.
Is that the most pressing need is to raise up a generation of people who know how to use the land well.
Oh my God, we're desperate for it. An agricultural journalist named Alan Giebert, who I think is the best working agricultural journalist in the country today, says that there's 750,000 farmers left. I mean, what do you make of a country that can't feed itself and doesn't seem to care? What do you think? This is nuts. So we seem to always be pushing to get more experts of one kind or another, but what we need are people who know how to live without living at the next year's cost. And we can all take part.
Are there any particular efforts from the Berry Center where you're seeing real progress that encourages you?
Yes. I will say, before I say give an immodest answer, that I'm working with extraordinary people at the Berry Center. If I'd had any sense at all when I started the Berry Center, I would have worried about where the people were going to come from who would do the work. And let's see, we started in 2011, and 14 years ago, something like that. We now have a staff of 11 or 12. My colleague, Ben Aguilar, who's also my son-in-law, is back there. How many people work at the Berry Center? 12 in 2 weeks. I mean, it's extraordinary that these people are getting up every day to run the programs at the Berry Center and to solve the problems that need to be solved, and working, They're interesting, funny, they're having a good time as far as I can tell, unless they're faking it when they're around me. I'm having a good time. So anyway, so these people are running these programs, and there's extraordinary things going on, but they wouldn't seem extraordinary if I was trying to solve a global problem. I'm trying to solve a local problem. I am trying to provide examples of how other communities and places can use what we've done. But it's extraordinary to see farmers come to life again and to feel hope and to think that they could see themselves, first of all, continuing to farm, maybe continuing to farm without working off the farm, maybe passing their farms down to their children. That's an extraordinary thing. It's extraordinary to see community members come together to read books about, to read agrarian books like writers such as my father, but also other writers, Ernie Gaines, for instance, who write agrarian stories. And to have these community people coming together to talk about these stories, and then they're coming together to tell their own stories. And then they're coming together to have groups in little towns that are talking about the history of the little towns. This is wonderful. Our meat program, you know, our meat is good. People want it. It's going well. I think our Farm and Forest Institute, our education program, I mean, we've had 400 students in the last year, people coming to learn the skills that they need to farm, or they're learning agrarian history, or they're learning to write about their own stories, to write their own stories. It's not all good every day. There is a challenge a day, but it is good. It is good work, and I'm pleased to be doing it.
Is it the case that I think you have maybe 9 generations of family who've worked and farmed in that particular community? Is that right? And working on the 10th later. You said earlier today, you told a story about your grandfather and how he went to university and afterwards went to law school and was in D.C. and working for a congressman there, and at some point decided to come back home to the farm and to serve the people and the place that had made him. It says something about the purpose of education. I wonder if you might speak on that for these students who are thinking, like, what's the purpose of getting this education? What are they going to do with it?
Well, the purpose of your education should not be upward mobility. I can tell you that. The purpose of your education should be to be able to put yourself to use, I think. My father's going to have a new novel out this fall, and the novel is called The Force of a Story. This is getting to your question, don't worry. It'll take me 15 minutes, but it's going to get there. And the story is the sale of my great-grandfather's 1906 tobacco crop. My grandfather, who became the lawyer that you're talking about, told the story, and then my father's continued to tell the story of his father leaving on horseback to go to Louisville to watch his crop sold. The family that they left behind, that he leaves behind, is sitting around a table by the light of a coal oil lamp, talking about what might be done with the money, the extra money that the crop brings after the family's bills are paid. When my great-grandfather came back the next day, he came home with nothing. After the crop had sold, he had paid the warehouse fees, he had nothing from a year's work. This is the story of agriculture in this country. Boom and bust, mostly bust. And my grandfather would tell us that story, and then he would tell us the story of farmers leaving warehouses with tears running down their faces. And he said, he would tell us that he thought to himself, if I can do something about this, I will. And he did. So my grandfather was, I'll just say, he was an extraordinary man. He was a wonderful speaker, farmer, passionate farmer. He went to Georgetown College in Kentucky, and then went to Georgetown to law school in D.C. I won't fill in everything there, but somebody heard him speak and said, I want you to come to D.C. with me. So my grandfather was in D.C. going to law, and he said he'd go if he could go to law school. While he was there, he was on the floor of the House listening to conversations about parity, for instance. That idea that farmers should get back cost of production and make a living wage. He got a good deal of sophistication while he was in D.C. about how to get things done. So when he was offered a job that would have made him wealthy, he considered it for a couple of days and then went to his boss and the representative and said, I'm going home. And the representative said, you're ruining yourself. And my grandfather, who we called Big John, said, I'm going home. I don't want to look at tar paper roofs all my life. I want to look at grass. And he went home. And he set about to establish the Burley Tobacco Growers Cooperative, which protected farmers and farmland for decades. It was a farm program that served the people it was supposed to serve. Tobacco companies always hated it. We can talk about, and please remember, I'm not making a case for tobacco. I'm making a case for the principles of the program that he wrote. It became law, federal law, and so he, to me, is just such a beautiful example of someone who, first of all, loved where they were from, didn't feel like a country hick or something, used every advantage he had for his place and for his people. And we use his papers at the Berry Center so often in our work about the beef program. It keeps us going, really. What is government for, he wrote in his papers. It's to take care of these little people, and he did not mean that as a pejorative. We're all little people. What is government supposed to do? So then my father and my uncle had the same decisions to make. I've had the same decision to make. What are you going to do? Are you going to leave or are you going to stay? Some people must leave. That's all right. But we have stayed, and we've done everything we can for the place that we love the most. That is one possibility. And I say this mostly to just say to you all, it is a possibility for you. It doesn't mean that you're wrong if you do something else, but I want to just make it clear that that is, the prevailing culture will tell you that it is not the right thing to do. And I will tell you that it is something you can consider doing. My father was told he'd never have a writing career if he left New York and went home. I mean, he probably would have made more money. He probably would have been better known, but so what? So anyway, I don't remember what your question was.
That's great. Using your education for good.
Oh, okay. See, I told you I'd come back to it.
Well, this event is, of course, sponsored by the chaplain's office at Berry, and so it might raise the question, what role does faith or Christianity play in this kind of discussion? Some of the students here tonight have encountered Wendell Berry's writings through their theology and literature class, taught by Jordan Rowan-Fannin. And I wondered if you might speak to that, like the role that faith has played in Wendell's understanding of the world, creation, or the purpose of human life.
Well, Daddy's never been terribly comfortable talking about his own, he writes about his, let me start that again. I don't like that, where that was going. I don't think that was going to turn out right. Let me start another way. I've heard Dad say, and he says it in writing somewhere, in an essay, that he's never been, he was speaking at a seminary in Louisville, and he said, when he started, he said, I've never been very comfortable in front of a pulpit, and I'm certainly not very comfortable behind one. So his work is, he's critical of churches. He's critical of the part that churches have played in the destruction of rural places, for one thing. Keeping people's eye on some kind of prize that's out here instead of, living a good life, living a bodily, creaturely life. But it's very clear. You've probably got the language to talk about this better than I do. But it is very clear in his writing and in discussions with him and in the way he lives his life that he believes that we live in a given world. Who gave it to us? He doesn't believe that you can get better from yourself. He believes that we have a given life. How are we going to use it? He believes in hubris, that we need to take our proper place in the chain of being, in the world. He believes that we should understand how limited we are. We've got a culture right now that seems to think that if you happen to have made billions of dollars, you not only must be smart, you must be right. Well, that's crazy. And they're crazy too, but we'll go. Daddy's faith, Daddy's Christianity, which he seldom says, but his Christianity has meant everything to him. He's got his father's Bible, which is marked on every page, that he reads every day. He just does, he believes that he ends the unsettling of America with this, that we have on our side that great truth that creation, capital C, can heal herself. And so that probably says it pretty well.
Yes. And the kind of reverence he shows the natural world has been particularly moving to me. He uses the word grace to talk about the givenness of things, which I think he means it in the religious sense, right? And it has a small book on Sermon on the Mount. I guess that's an older one, right? It's like from the 70s, the 80s or something.
Yeah,
He's been
way
writing
back
for a long
there.
time. Yeah. In just a moment, I'm going to give you a chance to ask some questions if you would like, and you can do so. You can already start registering those questions through the QR code on the screen, and some of those will get sent to me. But as that's happening, I'll tell you this quick bit about someone else recommending Wendell Berry, and they did it here on campus. So some of you might have been here when Andrew Peterson was here, the musician, singer, writer, poet himself. He's been very inspired for his career as a Christian artist from Wendell Berry's work. And when he was here, he was talking about the first time he heard about him. He said something like he was maybe using the bathroom at a concert. And he overhears two people talking. No, Andrew Peterson, not Wendell. Andrew overhears these people talking, and one guy says, "Have you heard of this guy named Wendell Berry? He's got a new book out called Jayber Crow." And the guy said, "No, I haven't heard of it." He said, "It's like the New Testament." And he said, as he's listening to this, he thinks, that's the most heretical book review I've ever heard. But that also really makes me want to read that book, which he did. And you can too, because it's for sale here.
Well, I will
tonight.
say Daddy would object to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He would object to that. He would, he has When people call him and they have all my life a prophet or a this or a, he objects to that. He would not say that anything he's written is a New Testament.
Well, that seems perfectly in keeping with his character, right? Yes. All right, I'm going to take a look here for a second at what questions might be coming from the group. Would you be willing to give some advice to college students who are trying to connect to their food source while having limited resources and time?
Well, sure. I've been, as I often am, moved by questions from young people about what they need to do. What do we need to do? We've got to figure it out. And I think I'm dodging the question first before I get to the question. The first thing that you all need to do is take advantage of the opportunity you've got here. Learn all you can, and keep that up. You're not ever going to know enough, but you don't have to be at Berry College worrying about exactly what you're going to do about all these things. You've got time now to learn. I mean, people told me this when I was your age, and I did not listen. I actually thought I already knew everything. But turns out that I did not, or do not. So I'd say the first thing you need to do is be grateful and take advantage of what's being offered to you here. I mean, in just the few teachers and mentors that I've met, I mean, you have a wonderful opportunity here. Take advantage, take full advantage of it. Part of that education might be to figure out how not to be fooled. I mean, we've had a local food movement for 40 years. And in the 40 years since the local food movement started, I mean, it's hard to put a definite date on that, but I kind of put it at 1976 when a restaurant in Berkeley, California called Chez Panisse opened, and suddenly there was a lot of talk about buying from farmers and that this was better and so on and so forth by a woman named Alice Waters. So we've had 40 years of this talking, carrying on about local, and in the meantime, we've lost thousands and millions of acres of farmland. We're down to less than 0.75% farming. So what the local food movement has done is allow big organic, big food companies to go right around farmers. I mean, they could move a lot more quickly than the farm culture could move. And so now we've got grocery stores full of organic, and it's fairly cheap, and so on. So first of all, don't be fooled. Secondly, if you have access to decent food, get some of it, need some of it, learn to cook it, learn how to cook. And I understand students probably can't afford to go to farmers markets and spend a lot of money on food, but you have an excellent, I mean, I'm pretty committed to this farm here at this point after one day here, and you could at least learn about what's going on right out here, even if you're not eating it in your cafeteria, and why you're not is beyond me. But anyway, I think that you can go out and go to the dairy. Figure out, you don't have to be the work study student, I don't think. They'll let you,
Come check it out.
Get to know something about the raising and the caring for animals, the raising of food, and take advantage of what you can do. I don't think that's a great question. It's a difficult question. But your responsibility is to learn as much as you can learn. That's what you need to be doing.
Another book that we have for sale in the back is a collection of poems called Sabbath Poems that Wendell has written. Would it be okay if I read a short one from the group? This is one
What
of
if
the
I
more,
said no?
I'll say you can read it. Yeah, okay. Can you read it? One of the more well-known poems by Wendell Berry is called The Peace of Wild Things. It says, when despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feed. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars, waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
I have something to say about that poem. Daddy now says that he doesn't like the use of the word wild in that poem because he says the creatures aren't wild. We're wild. We're the ones that are wild. So just something to throw in.
Great. A couple more questions from the audience. Someone asked about modern technology and what you think about that with reference to farming.
I'd love to know what do they talk? What do you think they're talking about? Tractors or
maybe the way modern industrial farms use more technology than human labor, of course, and
okay.
Maybe is it good to use some, but not a lot? Or?
Well, at in our education program, what we're teaching is to use your head before you use money. So I certainly think that some of the farmed technology can be helpful. I mean, my husband has farmed with horses, but he farms with appropriately scaled tractors now. They're small and they're old and he can fix them, but he uses them. So in our school, we use appropriate technology. We're trying to keep alive the draft animal knowledge, but what worries me about the technology is, first of all, a lot of it just replaces people. And so now we've nearly eradicated the small dairy industry in this country. And so we have huge 5,000 cow dairies that are milked by robots or very badly treated workers. And so we've replaced the people. So this is a fantasy that we can continue to feed ourselves, live the way we want to, and just sort of bypass nature and limits and so on. I don't think people have the cultural sense anymore to make good decisions about technology. I mean, I'm holding a microphone. I mean, it's not that I don't use it. I have a phone, a cell phone. I use a computer. But I think people just, I mean, I just heard about, something that what is it you use in your computer? What is Sam selling, Ben? Some kind of program that it's for beef cattle farmers, and it costs $10,000 to use it. It's some kind of program for your computer. So I said to my friend, do you think farmers should be in more debt? Is that the point here? But I think that we've lacked the discernment that, as far as I know in this country, only the Amish have shown, which is, what will this do to our community? Is this good for our community? I think the old order Amish have accomplished this pretty well. They're, we can discuss the Amish if you want to, but I don't think we know how to say no or why we should say no. And so we'll just buy anything. And so that worries me about our culture, period. But farming in particular, I mean, you cannot farm and make a living and buy everything somebody wants you to buy. I mean, you're going to have to learn the skills. Somebody said to me not so long ago, well, Mary, this AI is really going to help forestry, which is behind, sustainable forestry is behind sustainable agriculture, which is nearly nowhere. It said you could just hang this AI thing in your woods, and it'll tell you what your woods needs. And I said, what we're trying to do is teach people the the skill and the knowledge to make a judgment about what their woods on their farm, how to use the woods well. Who puts the intelligence in the AI thing? I don't know. Maybe some of you all know, but I don't know. So I just think we need to work on our ability to make judgments, make critical judgments about these kinds of things that people just want to, they want your money. Don't let them have your money. There's a short story that ends with that. By a dad.
In The Unsettling of America, Wendell has a section where he talks about the difference between the expert and the like amateur or specialist and generalist. I can't remember the precise words he used. It says something like the expert specialist is no longer self-sufficient. They have to depend on so many other people to do things. And so it's kind of a loss when educational systems and such are training people to do highly specialized work when they can no longer take care of themselves.
Well, that takes us back to the beginning of this conversation. A specialist knows one thing. As you and I talked about earlier, where does Daddy say, in The Unsettling, I think, that doctors don't care anything about the health or the quality of the food people eat, correct? And what was the other thing?
The food industry doesn't care about health.
Yeah. I mean, that these things are connected is just missing. So that's a result of too many specialists who are paid too much money.
So a good general knowledge of how to take care of yourself and things and the world around.
They have the use of your own head.
That's great. Maybe one last question. Someone asked if you might be willing to say more about closing the divide between rural and urban communities. Have any ideas there?
I have all kinds of ideas, and it's what we're doing at the Berry Center is working on that every day. I think we have to, a lot of the work has been very urban, very, very urban centered. Urban gardens and community gardens and farm markets and so on, and that's all fine. There's nothing wrong with any of that. What a lot of people have ignored is the countryside of this, the unwieldy countryside full of hard-headed people who are sometimes difficult to work with. But so I think that we need to be thinking in our own places about solutions that fit where we are, and think hard about those. I mean, when I started the Berry Center, I knew that I was going to continue my grandfather's thinking and bring back the idea of parity and so on to benefit our local farmers, but I wasn't sure where to start, which seems absurd to me now, but I was so inundated with the vegetable thing that it took me a while to think, wait a minute, what we have here are cattle farmers. This is where the passion is. This is where the interest is. And we've got urban neighbors who are eating an awful lot of meat. So there is where the connection needs to be. But I had to think about the health of my own place too, not just educating the consumer or whatever all that is. So, yeah, I don't think that's a very good answer, but it's the answer I'm going to give. I think he
Thank
has
you.
a question.
Mr. Davies, would you like to say?
I have to say thank you to Berry College for sending their agriculturalists to us, Dr. Campbell, at the Davies Homeless Shelters. We take care of 35 people a night. We've established gardens. We have a farm bus. We go out to food deserts in the community and sell great vegetables at below market prices for families that couldn't have food otherwise anyway. And then we've also worked out an arrangement with restaurants at end of day prepared foods that are being thrown away that are divine foods that we pick up. And also, but the very students, scholars, faculty, administration have been so good to us.
We thank you, Mr. Davies, for
That's excellent.
beginning that good work here in our community. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah.
I do want to say about that, however, that, not however, but I want to add to that. At home, a whole lot of time has been wasted with people thinking that if they would just match up the struggling small farmers and the poor people in Louisville, that those two stressed populations could solve each other's problems. This has not worked. So you got to have a way, and I know you do, to subsidize a program like that. I mean, the farmers who are raising those vegetables need to be paid fairly for them. So that needs to be subsidized. I just want to make sure that people understand that piece of it, just that piece.
Enough to be competitive and alter prices or anything else. We just fill a little gap.
I think it sounds wonderful.
And thankfully, the Berry students and Dr. Brian Campbell's work has been able to contribute in making that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Ms. Mary Berry for being here with us tonight.
You all.
Thank you. A couple of quick announcements before we go. Once again, there are books for sale in the back by Wendell Berry. I encourage you all to leave with one in your hands. There's also information about the Berry Center, and Ben Aguilar, Director of Operations, is back there with his lovely daughter, Lucy. You can talk with them about their work. Also, if there's any refreshments left on that table, I want you to eat them, take them, hand them to your friends. Go be a blessing. And if you're here for a CE credit, don't forget to scan out. Thank you for coming. Good night.